Okay, well so if there's nothing else particularly, I'll start with the first verse that Master Hua started with. And this one people are very familiar with. Okay, let me first start. So the preface that Shifa wrote for the book, she actually said Master Hua composed these poems late at night during the Avatamsaka Sutra lecture series. The 10 Dharma Realms are not beyond a single thought. And then he meditated all the rest of the night. And he came down to lecture the next day, and he said these are really important. And that in fact people will get enlightened in the future from these verses. That these verses are really important. And he gave these lectures in a very dynamic, inspired way, very funny. And so the first verse he gives, see if I remember it, 绕人欲了知三世一切人因观法界性如来为心造. So he says basically, if one would want to understand all the people of the three periods of time, contemplate the nature of the Dharma realm, the Tathagatas are made from the mind alone. And so he begins with the idea of people. And so people know that. Does everybody here know that verse? People know that verse? Right? That verse we just chanted in evening ceremony. What are the differences in what Master Hua kind of chanted and what we normally recite?
So, character Buddha, it was replaced by the human being, the Ren.
Yeah. And then there was one more, right? One more thing that was slightly different. If you want to understand if we wish to understand all the people of the three periods of time, contemplate the nature of the Dharma realm, the Tathagatas are made from the mind alone. Anybody for the second one? Okay, I'll give you the hint. The last line. The last line. Wishing now to understand all the Buddhas of the three periods of time, contemplate the Dharma realm, all things are created from mind. So we chanted an evening ceremony today. So the last one is all things. The last one is all things, everything. Everything is created from the mind. And so Master Hua begins with the idea that he starts with, I changed it to people because people don't know what Buddhas are. But people know what people are. And so because we know what people are, therefore we can have a place to start from. And he basically says, in the future, people will become Buddhas, people can become Buddhas, and that Buddhas come from people. And so that is how he starts. And that basically, when we contemplate the nature of the Dharma realm, we're contemplating all the living beings in the Dharma realm. We're not contemplating that the Dharma realm has a nature. We're contemplating the living beings in the Dharma realm. And finally, he says that everything is created from mind. That everything is created from this moment of thought. What we're doing in this current thought moment will lead us into the future of wherever we go. So that principle, that verse, is a contemplation we do a lot in the monastery. Right? People know the beginning of the ceremony. Do people pay attention to the very beginning at CDDB when they hit the drum and the fish? Do people know the rhythm? You hear the fish hit that, right? You hear the drum hit that. Do you know what you're supposed to chant? Anybody? 若人欲了知三世一切佛. If you wish to understand the nature, if you wish to understand all the Buddhas of the three periods of time, and then you contemplate the rest of the verse. So before you start the ceremony, you immediately enter the contemplation. This is all created from your mind. That's the kind of the first space you enter into in the ceremony. So that's the rhythm that you chant in the beginning. 若人欲了 So that verse is one that we use a lot in the monastery. And so it's helpful to have us be familiar with it, to see that we're very responsible for every single thing that happens to us and where we're going to go in the future. Do you have anything to add?
This also includes understanding that everything is coming from the mind alone. Whatever we see, it's not what's really going on, but our perception. This one you have to see within yourself, to see if it's true or not, to see if you do these things. So it's when you meet someone, it is your impression of that person that makes who that person is to you. So say if I see someone on the street and if his clothes look dirty, immediately I might think that, oh, this person is homeless. So I project an image of who I think this person is onto this person. So until I change my mind, that's who that person is. As far as I'm concerned, he's a homeless person because that's what my mind makes up. Without even speaking to him, without even knowing anything about him at all. So as we go through life, when we meet people, sometimes just based on how they look or based on the things they say, we form impressions on people. And then the second thing that we do is we interpret the things that they do through that lens, somewhat. So if he say were to this person who I think in my mind is a homeless person, were to stretch out his hand towards me, I might think that he's asking me for something in my mind. So right now I just thought of a very funny incident. He paused for a moment, understood what was going on, that I wasn't waving to him. And then I saw him very clearly. He tried to disguise that action by rubbing his head as if that was what he intended to do all along. And that made me laugh because he interpreted my action really, really quickly, thinking I was waving to him. And this was a sports club that I used to go to, so probably he recognized me or something. I'm not sure. I don't remember that. And then what he says after that is that because of all our projections, whatever that person does, so if that person comes up to me and I think that he's coming up to me in a threatening manner and I feel afraid, not only is that fear solely based on my projection, it may have nothing to do with what's going on, reality at all, but I make that person responsible for how I feel. Does that make sense? Right? So there's layers upon layers of confused thinking. And in the end, I blame or I make that person responsible for how I feel, rather than recognizing the thoughts in my mind that put me in that place and being responsible for my own thoughts. I start off first creating an image of who this person is, just based on my own thoughts. And from there, eventually, depending on how he affects me, instead of being responsible for my own emotions and feelings and reactions, I make that person responsible for how I feel. So as I was reading this, and I was reflecting on how I go about my daily life, I think there's some truth there in how we interact with people and how we attribute our emotions to the people around us. Oh, that person made me angry, or that person made me happy, that person made me upset. So I'm not sure if this is what Jin Chuan showing.
Yeah, it's good.
Then he asked me if I had
Yeah,
anything to add.
That's
But
good. I just want to add something to what you said.
Yeah. You
Okay,
also
so-
read Nietzsche, right?
Yeah, I did. So I'm not going to talk about Nietzsche so much, but I wanted to point to that principle because I think it's a really valuable one for our cultivation in the monastery or at home, which is to see that our afflictions come from our projections. So if we have anything that's a problem in our life, if we really use that contemplation that I just recited in the beginning, in our daily life, we don't blame anything outside because we know everything is created from how I'm creating the world around me. So what Jing Heshe was just talking about, how we project out a person, I think we all have that. We all can kind of relate to that experience, but we forget about it. And we think, oh, that person is, that person, and therefore they do this, and therefore I'm upset. And we don't catch the extra layer where I have already added a layer of expectation on that person from my past habits, and from the things that I want, from the desires that I have, even my own attachments to myself, the insecurities that I might have, you can just go through the list of afflictions, all the things in our hearts that kind of confuse us. So all those things get put on the other person. But we think that's the other person, and we don't see it in ourselves, putting it out there. And so in our practice, where we really can have, you could say, some freedom, is to be able to get free of those projections. Most of the time in the world, what we try to do is to make the world accord with our projections.
Do you need a job?
We get the world to accord with our projections. If it accords with our projections, we're pretty happy. So I find somebody who generally praises me and makes me feel good about myself. Oh, I'm very happy. I go out and I get a good job that accords with my personality and my likes and dislikes. Oh, I'm pretty happy. I get food that I like to eat. Oh, I'm very happy. So on and so forth. We find things that make us happy based on our projections. And all of a sudden, we're put in an environment sometimes, in cultivation, where things don't go so smoothly. Especially when we come to cultivate in the monastery, we start having to be patient with things that come up that we don't expect. Let's say, for instance, tonight we have power outage, right? So we accord. Everybody's still here, which is very nice, and we're sitting here together. And rather than saying, oh, I wish Reverend Heng Sure was here, I wish, we had power, I wish da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then being disappointed with the mind in many different ways, to just say, oh, I just accord with what's happening. This is just how things are. And so not to add another layer of projections, and to see that any point when we get afflicted, we get impatient, it's not because the actual thing that's happening, it's because of the mind that I'm bringing to the situation. So everything is created from the mind. So moment to moment, if we can have that verse in our hearts, in our minds, as we go through the day, we'll find ourselves a lot more free, a lot more able to accord with the world without running into things and colliding with things.
So, if that's really true, then our experience of life can be very superficial. It means we see a lot of things on the surface, and we make stories and ideas, and we form images in our mind, and we go along with that. And what Jin Chuan just said is that we also do that to ourselves. We are fairly superficial with our own feelings and intentions and what makes us who we think we are. So what the sixth Patriarch had to say about this was that first he said one thought, if thought, what did he say? Let me see. I shouldn't do this, trying to quote the six-petra.
What you do, you
Okay.
test people in the audience.
What? Test people in the audience.
What does the patriarch say?
Okay, I'm starting to see if I can make eye contact, Yunlin. Okay, okay. I think in principle what the six patriarchs say is that if thought after thought confused, then you are just a normal living being. But if thought after thought unconfused, then you are a Buddha. And this is then will lead to the segue back to Jin Chuan Xue and the 10 Dharma Realms. The actual quote that I wanted to attribute to the sixth patriarch was that he says that all living beings have the Buddha nature. So the impact that it had on me after the readings that we have been doing at DRBU is that if you really believe that all living beings have the Buddha nature, then when you see someone, you don't see them for who they are, but you see them for who they could be, their potential as bodhisattvas and as Buddhas. So I've heard before that people say that when a Rama master looked at you, he wasn't interested in who you were, but in who you could be, in your potential, and that he was always interested in how he could bring you to your fullest potential. So one way to get out of this superficial way of looking at the world around us and even ourselves is to be always aware that the person or the animal, the living creature that you're looking at or you're reading about or you're interacting with has the potential to be a Buddha. They have the potential for great compassion, for great strength, for all the virtues that a bodhisattva has, including the Buddha. And then you turn that focus inwards. Yourself, you also have this potential. And depending on how far you take and run with this attitude, it has the potential to truly transform your life, because normal people around the world, everyone, always see themselves as, oh, I can't do that because I have to do this. Or we see ourselves in terms of limitations, not in terms of potential. I can't do that because I don't have this degree, or I don't know anything about that, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not strong enough. And while that may be true to a certain extent, when it comes to the practice, six patriarchs say no such thing. You have no limitations except what you put onto yourself. So it all comes back to the mind. So if you see that you do have the Buddha nature, you can take that and push yourself to see what is your potential right now that either you have or that you can nurture and bring forth. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah,
Not saying anything. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think actually what Jing Husher just said was a very important turning of the principle, in the sense of we often look outward in our relationships, but we forget about ourselves, and that we're actually also in a relationship to ourselves. So, and that relationship we can't run away from. The other relationships in the world we can generally run away from. Like if we really don't like it, we run away from it. But from ourselves, we can only run so far, which is nowhere, because we're always with ourselves. And so to be able to see that actually the image of ourselves that we have is created from our minds is also very liberating, if you think about it. What Jing Husher just said is that that image inside is also a projection. It's not just that outside of, the person I'm relating to, but even this thing here that's sitting here that I call me is a projection. And it comes just from the habits and the you can say the habitual ways of thinking, or you can say karmic patterns from the past that make it what it is now. and it's always changing. And if I really want to be free, the I being, quote in quotes, because that's just a projection, that ultimately is realizing the potential that we all have, which is Buddhahood, which is full awakening. And this awakening isn't, if we read the sutras, the awakened mind isn't a static state. It isn't that, oh, I got awakened, I see things, I realize, a static state. I'm done. I'm finished. But how it's described is just what Ying Husher said, is thought after thought, unconfused, thought after thought, the Buddha. As if in moment after moment we do not get confused, we are awake. Then moment after moment, we are the Buddha. We can be awake. Of course, how much of our thoughts are confused and how much of our thoughts are awake. We can observe in ourselves what that's like. But the Dharma gives us you could say almost a framework to help us understand where we've gone wrong and to get aligned again with you could say, the kind of way things are that's always in flux, always changing. So I just want to point out that turning from just looking outside but looking inside is very important if we're on this path of practice. And I would say even potentially more valuable as an insight because we can't run away from ourselves.
So does anyone know how to recognize what do you say? What thought?
A confused thought?
A confused thought, yes. Does anyone know how to
recognize it?
Are confused and how to recognize them? No? And I start calling names. Okay, from the Pali Canon right up to all the Mahayana Sutras, any thought that's based on greed, anger or hatred, and delusion or ignorance, that means not understanding the way things are, is a confused thought. So any thought like that will generate karma that will bring you back into rebirth in any of the 10 eight rebirths.
There's 5 other paths, so 6 paths in samsara.
6 paths.
So unless you get reborn you don't get really reborn, but you go to the sage realms. So there's 6 realms and 6 destinies in samsara. So 10 Dharma realms, 6 are the hells, animals, hungry ghosts, asuras, humans, and devas. And then you have the sound hearers, arhats, Parcheka Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. So 6.
So it's easy, right? Greed, anger, or hatred, and delusion or ignorance. Just these 3. But if it was that easy, then we could all be enlightened in the next moment. So that's where Angela's question comes in, the 10 good deeds or the 10 evil deeds. So the Buddha gave us certain containers, like the 10 good deeds, the Noble Eightfold Path, the precepts that we can use as a mirror to look at our minds, our thoughts, as thoughts and as before they lead into actions and speech, so that we don't perpetuate confused thinking.
Next, okay, so I don't know. Had people know these verses by Master Hua? Do people know the next verse? Okay, so
before, but I forgot.
Oh, you forgot it. Okay, I don't really know how to say all of it in Chinese because some of those characters are too hard for my limited Chinese skills. But in English, it goes like this: neither great nor small, neither come nor gone, in worlds numbering like particles of dust, they mutually shine light upon one another, sitting atop their lotus thrones. 不大不小，不来不去，世界河沙，恒沙. And there's 2 characters I don't know. Some the Guang lian tai. So that's the.
连台
Oh, say again.
交
Jiao
应
Ying, Jiao Ying Lian Tai. Very good. So, so basically,
You have to say what realm is this?
oh, this is that. This so what realm is that I just described? What people will guess. What's that realm? Buddha, Bushao. Not great, not small. Neither come nor gone.
Buddha.
The Buddha. That's right. The Buddha. So this is the
Buddhas.
first realm, the Buddhas. Yeah, the realm of the Buddhas. And so the master, in this series of talks, is very funny. So he says, when I first heard the word Buddha in English, I was a little deaf. And so what I heard was Buddha. Buddha. And in Chinese, what Buddha literally means is not big. So that's what the verse starts with Buddha, Bushao. Right? Buddha, not big. Right? Bu is not, da is big. So he says, he thought, oh, that's pretty good. The Buddha's not big. Right? The Buddha's not big. He says, oh, because why? The Buddha doesn't have a big self. He's not always going, I, me, put me in the center. I need to be number one. The Buddha's not that way. But then he goes, however, is the Buddha small? He says, no, the Buddha's not small either. He doesn't lack self-confidence. He's not, thinking he's inferior to other people. He's not prideful, and he's not feeling inferior. He's not big, not small. So I think that's a very deep principle if you think about it, right? Because most of the time we flip between those two realms. When we do something, or at least I do something, I think, oh, I did this really well. I did it really well. Wow, I'm really great. Wow, I'm really successful. I'm really smart. I'm really da. I'm very productive. Right? All those thoughts of I that inflate the self, making it bigger and bigger. And it almost gives a little bit of a rush, kind of gives this feeling of buoyancy. But when we really look at it carefully, those thoughts are based on delusion, are illusory. They don't really have a foundation in reality. Things are just the way they are. I don't need to add another layer of projections about how great I am on top of it, right? You can take the exact same principle and flip it around for the negative side. Oh, I'm not as good as that person. Oh, I'm always a failure. Oh, I can't do this. This is just too hard. I'm nobody, and so on. I again, but the I on the flip side. And so, what do we do about that, right? In society, especially in California, we're in our education, we often talk about building self-confidence. Right? You don't have no self-confidence. And sometimes it goes to an extreme where pretty much anything you do, you get praised for. Oh, very good, good try, right? And that ends up. My aunt says that this is in Taiwan. She says that my generation, or growing up, they have a name for us in HR. They call us the strawberry generation because it looks very nice on the outside, but you just touch it and it gets bruised. It bruises very easily, so you have to protect it really well. Right? Our generation needs to be protected very well in our own self-image of ourselves. Being
what generation is
the
it?
Strawberry generation.
I know.
草莓.
What year?
What year?
To what? I mean, how would you?
How would maybe people in their 20s and 30s now? People are entering the workforce. We're called this. They call it a term in Taiwan at least. This 草莓. I don't know what generations would be. 年代.
Millennial.
Millennial.
After 1980s.
After 1980s.
So
Yeah.
Michael, you're one of them.
Yeah.
Are you a strawberry?
Are you a strawberry? We poke you, will you get bruised easily?
Probably.
No, Michael's a lot tougher than that. Yeah.
Wait, does it refer to only, does it refer to both Taiwanese under 30 and California?
I would say it probably applies to us as well, quite a lot. It might even apply to us even more.
I think
That's
you
my
have to,
observation.
I think that's a question people have to ask themselves.
Yeah, you can ask yourself. Yeah, we don't need to project outwards, but the experience is that basically we're used to being praised. and we take criticism very tough. It's very hard for us to take criticism or difficulty. We just give up very easily. So you can reflect, is that me? I mean, I think you can be 50 years old and also be a quote-unquote strawberry, right? But the principle I wanted to point to was, in this verse, the Buddha is not big and not small. And it's not because he's, what I would say, rejected being big, rejected being small. That's not the principle. The principle is because he has no self there to be big. He has no self there to be small. So in our practice, in our reflections, what we're talking about a moment ago, was to not project this kind of self that I have to protect. How do we do that? Is that we can let it go. If we have a thought of, I'm great, we just let it go. We see it arise in the mind, and we just let it go. If we have a Dharma practice, like reciting Guanyin Bodhisattva's name, we recite Guanyin Bodhisattva's name. And what that does is replaces the thoughts of self with Guanyin Bodhisattva. And bit by bit, our attachment to the self lessens. And a freedom arises that's not based on the duality of big and small, of success and failure. Right? That's where I think the Dharma is really valuable, is because it actually points to the root of the problem. It doesn't try to go for the superficial solution. Oh, you're feeling really inferior, or you're feeling really proud. Well, let me try to raise your self-confidence and make you really confident about yourself, or you're really prideful. Let me criticize you and bring you down. You know, I think a great teacher does that, but he does that, I would say, if you look at the experiences, I think, with the senior disciples, Master Hua didn't do it in a way that was hurtful. He did it in a way so they can awaken to how they're creating their self, how they're creating their self-image. And so that's what we can do, is if we can see, oh, that's the experience of me creating a self, and if I can let that go, then I can truly be not big and not small. And so Master Hua says this is, okay, I say the whole series of verses are called the 10 Dharma Realms are not beyond a single thought, because that means in this very thought, we can see, are we doing that? So in this thought, if this thought is a not big thought, a not small thought, then we're starting on the right path. You know, we're going towards the realm of the Buddhas. If the thought is a big thought, or if it's a small thought, I think later we can talk about it. We probably can't get it tonight, but for instance, a thought of fighting, where does that lead? If people can guess.
Ashura.
Ashuras, yeah. So if we always want to be number one and want to fight and be the best, then we end up in the realm of Ashuras. And so it's in the thought of the mind. Very good. I can talk about the second part if you don't have anything more.
What's the second part of it?
Not come, not gone. Neither comes nor goes.
Is that the realm of Bodhisattva?
This is just all the Buddha. This is a 4-line verse for the Buddha. So not big, neither great nor small, neither come nor gone. That's the second part. You can talk about the first one, or I can talk about the second one.
No, okay, you go ahead.
Okay, keep going. So please jump in whenever you like. Okay, second one is neither come nor gone. Do people know the word Tathagata? Right? Tathagata, Rulai. Do people know what that word means?
Yes.
Okay, do you want to share?
Thus come one.
Thus come one. Do you know it could also have a different meaning? Because it could be also translated as thus gone one. The Indians, or you could say the Buddha was a master of language. He would kind of make these kind of interesting combination of words to have multiple meanings. So because of how Sanskrit works, and I won't go into great detail because Sanskrit is very complicated, but what happens is when two words get combined, the middle word can pull on both sides. So for instance, the word tata means thus, the way things are. And gata means go, gone. But in Sanskrit, if you want to make it the word the opposite, you add an a in front of it. Like we have the word ahimsa, right? Not harming. Himsa means harm. Ahimsa means not harming. So agata means not gone or come. Somebody who's come. And then when you combine the words together, you get tata and gata. It becomes tathagata. And that means, it could mean thus come, or it could mean thus gone. So the thus come one or the thus gone one. So in the Buddha's own name, it's got the principle of he neither comes nor goes. Now, does that make sense? Okay, well, okay, so the word maybe makes sense, but does that concept make sense? How does somebody not come and not go? I mean, does that make sense? Do you know anybody in your life who has not come and not gone? Have we come? We're sitting here right now.
Because he has no self, so he doesn't know.
Oh, that's a good way to think about it. As Connie says, because the Buddha has no self, so he can't come nor go. That's a good principle.
Okay, so I have a question for everyone. So if he doesn't come or go, does that mean that he's always been the Buddha?
I mean, he is always there.
Yeah, it means he's always been the Buddha, he's always there. But we know, right? When Shakyamuni Buddha, before he became the Buddha, he was a prince. So that's an example of confused thinking. Because I don't know the answer. Okay, carry on.
Carry on. Okay. Well, I think there's probably many different ways of explaining it. And so I don't, at this moment, remember exactly what Master Hua said. And so I'll give you one idea for people to consider. And if it makes sense, then please accept it. If it doesn't make sense, then you can kind of forget it. So the Buddha is what Jing Hezhi just described as this prince who came and became the Buddha. And so it seems like he's come here to teach us. But in actuality, the Buddha nature is always there. It doesn't come nor go. We actually were studying the Lotus Sutra recently in DRBU, and there's a very beautiful story about a son who leaves the Buddha. I don't know if people know this story. It's kind of like the Buddhist version of the prodigal son story. People know the Christian version, right? In Christianity, there's a son that leaves his father and then later comes back and is welcomed back by the father. Well, the story goes here that basically there's this father and he has a son, but his son leaves him a long time ago. So they're not a very well-off family. They're a normal family. The son leaves the father, and the son starts having a very difficult time. You know, he gets impoverished. He's hungry. You know, he's just making barely enough to get by and survive day by day, day by day. And so it's a tough life. His father, on the other hand, has become extremely wealthy, extremely powerful, and he has this grand, almost like a whole city, like a household that is really inspiring. You know, it's got servants. He's got people working. Everybody's very harmonious and peaceful. You know, there's jewels. Usually, in Health Sutras, there's jewels everywhere, right, representing virtue, right? This kind of sense of this beauty. And so his son, looking for work, comes upon this household. And at this time, his father is getting older, and he's thinking, I wish I knew where my son was, because right now I don't have an heir. I would like to give all this I have to my son, but I don't have a son. My son, I don't know where he is. So his son comes to the front door of this household, and his son, it says, doesn't recognize his father at all, doesn't recognize the place at all. And he looks, and he sees this place, and he gets scared. And he goes, I better leave, because I might get captured and put into service here. Who knows what this place is? This person looks like a king or a great ruler. I better leave. And so he starts to run away. Now, the father is sitting there and sees this straggly young man come to, or not that young of a man, this kind of older man come to the front door, and then leave. He goes, "That's my son." So what does he do? You know the story? What does he do?
He hired. He hired.
He hired. Well, not yet. So he sends two of his servants running after this son to bring him back, right? So these servants catch up with his son, and they say, "Oh!" And his son gets so scared he faints. The Buddha tells this story in long detail. His son is so scared. "Oh my goodness, they're come to capture me!" And he faints, and he goes unconscious. And the servants bring the son back, and the father sees his son, and he's just very kind of disheartened. He's, "Oh, my son doesn't recognize what's happening." And so he says to his servants, "Let him go, let him go." He doesn't tell anybody it's his son. He says, "Let him go, let him go." So his son wakes up, and the servants tell him, "No, you can go free. You're no problem. Just leave." He says, "Oh, wow." His son's so happy. "Oh, I'm free. I can go." And so he runs off, and he finds a little town nearby where he finds a very simple job, and he works day in just enough to get a living. So now his father has a method. What does he do? He sends out another group of servants, and these servants, he has them dressed up in really kind of raggedy robes, right, to go to see his son and tell his son, "We have a job for you, and we'll pay you twice of what you're currently doing." And what's the job? It's sweeping dung. It's sweeping dung. And his son's like overjoyed. "I get twice the amount of money I can make now. Wow, that's great. I just have to sweep dung. This is great." So he goes to this place in the back corner, and he's sweeping dung. And his father is sitting inside the house looking out the window, and he sees his son there sweeping dung. And he's thinking to himself, "Gosh, this is my son. And he's sweeping dung." Okay, and so he goes, okay. So he goes out and he puts on kind of straggly clothes, puts a little dirt on himself, and he goes and sees his son and says, "You work really hard. You're a great worker," And he tells the other workers, "See, he's a good worker. I would like to make him, promote him, and run different things in the household." And so what he does is he gives this man, his son, more responsibility. And then year by year, he promotes him, so he ends up taking care of the whole household. All the finances, all the things, he's taking care of it. But this time, the son still thinks very lowly of himself. So he still lives, in a little corner of the house, in a little small place, very, very lowly place. And so what happens is that finally, many years pass. Maybe I think something like 20 or 30 years pass. And his father is about to die. So he calls everybody together. And then he says to everyone, and tells his son, who's there too, he says, "In fact, this is actually my son. Everything that I have is actually his. Everything I have is actually his." And his son is overjoyed. He got something he never expected. This is, he's like, "Wow, I've never thought this was my inheritance. This is all mine." And the Buddha gives this example as an analogy for him teaching us living beings, or teaching at that time particularly the sound hearer disciples, Mahakashapandam. Actually, Mahakashapandam give this analogy for what their experience is. And the Buddha, you can say, confirms this story. And they say that for themselves, they came into the teachings, and the Buddha, because he knew that they didn't have the aspiration to be realized Buddhahood, they gave them something to do, sweeping dung. And what's the sweeping dung? It's sweeping away our afflictions. We're cleaning out our afflictions bit by bit. And that we can make a wage. What's our wage? Of realizing arhatship, realizing enlightenment, the nirvana, the nirvana of the arhat. And so he says, we can realize that. So they work really hard to realize that, to enter this kind of, you could say, a kind of emptiness of affliction, emptiness of a self. And so they work really hard for that. And then bit by bit, the Buddha brings them into a vision of what their true abilities are, is to realize Buddhahood. But the key principle when I was talking about neither come nor gone was the principle of the inheritance, is that in fact, your inheritance, which is Buddhahood, is not something you have to work for. That's why it's not come nor gone. Is that it's something that's always there with us all the time, but we don't recognize it. That's our awakened potential. Our awakened potential is always there all the time. We don't actually have to seek it from the outside. It's there, neither going nor neither going, neither coming. It's always there. It's just removing our confusion and our doubts and our narrow-mindedness and our limitations of mind from being able to realize that awakening. So that's why it's neither come nor gone. So the Buddha has just returned to that place that neither comes nor goes. While we abide in a place that's always coming and going, always trying to achieve something, always trying to run away from something. Right? And the Buddha knows that, and so what he does is it begins with is, okay, let me teach you something to do, because that's all we know. So it says, sweep away your afflictions. Start with that. Sweep away your afflictions. And then bit by bit, as we sweep afflictions away, we begin to see that actually those afflictions were all empty to begin with, and that our awakened potential was always there, neither going, neither coming. So that's one way to understand it. The Master didn't use that example, but you can go read it yourself online. I just was trying to think about what would be the principle. Okay, so the next line of the verse. Oh, you want to say?
Yeah.
Okay,
Since
please.
you said the story, there's a few things that, as you were relating the story, I've been thinking about. So does everyone know how close we are to our Buddha nature?
One soul away.
One throat.
One thought away.
She said
thought
one
away.
thought away.
One thought away.
Is actually closer than that. Our ability to hear, to see. What's that sound?
Sorry.
No.
Is that your low battery?
No, text message.
Text message.
Text message.
Oh, okay.
People have
So-
questions online. Yeah.
Are there questions?
No, but Reverend Heng Shui was on.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sure was listening.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. If we said
So-
anything wrong, please let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, by remote correct us. So our ability to see, hear, smell, touch, feel, and think is all because of our nature. We are using our Buddha nature every single moment. That's how close we are. We are functioning because of our Buddha nature. That's how close we are. But we don't know that because, like Tin Funshu said, our afflictions cover our nature over. So although we are functioning as a result of our nature, because of our afflictions, we are just like that young man who, because life, he forgot who he was. And because he forgot who he was, he didn't know his potential. He didn't know that he had the nature. So remember we started earlier saying about how we limit ourselves in life. So this story shows how someone, without understanding that he was the heir to one of the richest people that he knew, which is a metaphor for the Buddha nature. When he saw his father's home, the home that he was growing up in, that he forgot, he actually got scared. He said, no, that's not me, I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
And the father, which is the Buddha, sees us like that. The father had, what Instruction didn't say was that the father thought about the son all the time. He never forgot his son. That's why the analogy of the father and the son. If you lose a child, If a child goes missing, you will day and night think about the child. So the Buddha gave this story, the Lotus Sutra, because it's really excellent. It tells us that we are the person who have forgotten about our, what do you call it?
Inheritance.
Our inheritance. Inheritance. We have it right now. But because of our greed, anger, and delusion, our afflictions, it covers the very nature that we depend on, and we don't even see it.
Okay. Yeah. So the master actually does a lot with this particular Dharma realm. He actually. So the other thing I realized with Master Hua is he asks a lot of questions in his Dharma talks. He would say things like, it's almost like he's like reading people's minds. You know, it's like, oh, so people might be thinking this. Am I a Buddha? He says, yes, you're a Buddha. He says, are you a Buddha? Meaning the master. Yes, I'm a Buddha. He says, is he a Buddha? Yes, he's a Buddha. Right? He says, but we're all fake Buddhas. We're not real Buddhas yet. We all can become Buddhas. And he says, let me give you an example. And he points to a young boy in the audience. He says, Guo Fang. He says, Guo Fang here, when he grows up, will he become an adult? Will he grow old? Yeah. He says, that's just like us in the Buddha Dharma. Right now, we're just like little children in the Buddha Dharma. But when we grow up in the Buddha Dharma, we'll become Buddhas. And so that's connected with the principle, neither come nor gone, right? The idea that it's in our inheritance. So in our cultivation of the Dharma, we're here listening to the sutra, listening to the Dharma. And that's nurturing our bodhi seeds, our potential for awakening. And there's no force involved. So the Buddha didn't, like in the analogy that we just gave, or the story we just gave, the son comes and the Buddha tried to bring him back, but he was so scared he fainted. The Buddha didn't keep him, or the father didn't keep the son and say, okay, you have to work for me, you're my son, right? Because he knew the son would be just overwhelmed. And so he let the son go, just like the Buddha. He's not going to force us, right? He doesn't force us to wake up. But bit by bit, he teaches us through our own process of awakening to wake up. And we just have to grow up. So that's all it is. So in our practice here, if we can take our cultivation in that spirit, that's a really good spirit to take it in. We're just growing up, right? We're just maturing as people. That's it. Nothing special. We're not becoming a super person. We're not becoming better than anyone else. We're just growing up. We're just becoming the best potential, the most we could possibly be. So that's the second line of the verse. The third line of the verse the third and fourth lines also go together. It says, in world systems numbering like particles in the Ganges sand, or sands of the Ganges River, sitting atop lotus thrones, they mutually shine light upon one another. And so, in Buddhist cosmology, or how the Buddha describes the world, we see it in the Avatamsaka Sutra, where Reverend Hong gives the lectures on Saturday nights usually, about how our world right now, we just see this world around us, right? We're on planet Earth, in this solar system, in this universe, right? And we seem to be a very small speck in this great expanse of a universe. But the Buddha's vision of reality is that there's world systems upon world systems upon world systems ad infinitum, going out, going out, going out. But at the same time, all of that is contained in a single hair pore of the Buddha. This kind of big and small kind of interpenetrate with one another in the Avatamsaka Sutra vision. And the Buddha is there sitting on a lotus throne. We see pictures of, like for instance over there, we can't see it that well, is the Buddha right sitting on the lotus. On our altar, we have the Buddha sitting on lotuses, right? They sit on the lotus, and Master Hua says, they sit there shining their light on one another and mutually illuminate one another. He says, because the Buddha's lights don't conflict. It's not like I shine my light on that Buddha, or that Buddha shines light on me, and one Buddha goes, I don't want your light. Stop shining your light on me. Don't stop shining your light on me. King Fletcher just, for the people online, he just shined his flashlight because we have no power. He just shined his flashlight on me. So the Buddhas are mutually supportive of one another. They illuminate one another. And the master gives the analogy of Indra's net. Right? Do people know Indra's net? Right? Can anybody describe Indra's net? What does it look like?
Spider web.
A spider web? Oh, that's a nice image. A spider web. What else would be on the spider web? Pearls, mani jewels. I hear mani jewels. And what's unique about these pearls and mani jewels?
They reflect every other jewel.
They reflect every other jewel on this net, on this web. And so in every single jewel, you see every other jewel at the same time. So this is one way you could maybe think about the example I just gave about how in every hair pore, you have all the world systems, because every part of that web contains every other part of the web. And if you look at any other part of the web, it contains that part of the web. Now this might seem to be a very abstract idea, but in fact, it's actually, I can think of it actually is a very concrete example. Just imagine the food we eat every day, right? I don't know if people ate at the monastery today, or if you ate at home, or if you're online and you are, wherever you are in the world. I'm guessing you had some food today. And so when you had that food, who cooked that food? Okay, maybe you cooked it yourself. Now who grew that food? Now maybe you grew it yourself, right? But there's the sun that shined on the plants that made the plant grow. There was water that allowed the plants to grow. There are people who drove the food to where you ate, you had it so that you can cook it or eat it. And if you were to look out from that simple act of eating, from that food in front of you, you can relate it out to the entire cosmos and to throughout the universe, because it's all interrelated. That's the kind of interpenetrating web of Indra's net that the Buddha describes as the actual way our reality is. So on a very practical level, I think if we look at relationships, is that who I am, actually Jing He, when I look at Jing He, I actually see myself, and when I look at myself, I actually see Jing He, because we relate to one another in certain ways that informs my existence, as well as everybody else here in the audience, and everybody else online. I might not see it directly because my vision is so limited, but somehow we're all interconnected in a very profound way. And so that's Indra's net. And if we can abide in that vision and that spirit all the time, then we can go through life with very little conflict, right? If I get into conflict with, somebody else, then I'm just getting in conflict with myself. I'm just obstructing his potential for awakening and my potential for awakening. I'm just obstructing, I'm just blocking something. But if I can just have my light shine, and that other people's light shine, and that our mutual lights shine on one another to make it even brighter. So the Master says that's the realm of the Buddhas. That's the realm of the Buddhas. So if in our minds we can abide in this vision of Indra's net, where we're always lighting up the world throughout all of the Dharma realm at all moments and all times, wow, then we're in that awakened, that kind of awakened mind. The seeds of the awakening is right there. Anything else?
So one way to look at it is the Sanskrit word karuna, which means compassion. So compassion means that you recognize that as living beings go through life, they also undergo a mixture of happiness and suffering. And compassion recognizes that the suffering part and the wish that beings can be free of that suffering. So in Buddhist terminology, karuna means that a wish that living beings, can be free of suffering. And then there's maha karuna, which is great compassion. And the bodhisattvas have that great compassion. And the difference between maha karuna, which is great compassion, And karuna, which is just compassion, is the scope and the agency. Okay, so the only difference between how we can feel compassion and how the bodhisattvas feel and the Buddha feels great compassion is first the scope and secondly the agency. So we go through normal life and it's easy to feel compassion, especially for the people we care about. People you care about, when you see them undergoing some kind of difficulty in life, there's a natural tendency within us to want them to be free of that difficulty. So that's compassion, karuna. Mahakaruna first differs in scope. You take that same feeling, but you really feel it for all living beings, not just the people who you care about. Or rather, everyone becomes someone you care about. No different from your spouse or your brother, your sister, your parents. You feel the same concern for them, that they be relieved of their suffering or difficulty, for all living beings as if they were your own family. And the second one is the agency. Okay, so compassion, you just hope that these people can be free of difficulty. The light is back.
We have power.
We have 6 minutes to go. And the second one, the agency, meaning great compassion, you see yourself as the agent. You are the one who wants to relieve these people of suffering. So that's the difference between compassion, karuna, and mahakaruna, great compassion. First, the scope. You extend that feeling to all living beings, which is what Chin Chuan was saying, there's no difference. And then secondly, you see yourself being in that role. You are responsible. So you do what you can based on what you have. So the Buddha wants us to reduce our delusion so that we can have wisdom, because through wisdom, we can really make a difference to support our aspirations for mahakaruna, for great compassion.
Wait, so your mahakaruna is no agency, right?
No, you see yourself as being directly responsible.
Okay.
Not to say that you see that as a self,
Oh, okay.
but you
Okay.
see yourself in a position where you can actually try your best to help people. And for bodhisattvas, because they have great wisdom, they can actually do it effectively. Just like the father who, when he saw the son, instead of telling the son, hey, wake up, you are my son, immediately, he does it through expedient means, through a way that the son feels comfortable, slowly, over time, even over years, until the time comes where the son can be ready to receive the news that this is his father, and all that the father owns is now his.
Yeah. So to build on that, if you look at that poem, the Buddha is sitting on lotus thrones, mutually illuminating all the other Buddhas, everyone else. And so this kind of great compassion comes from, I would say actually very interesting enough, it comes from prajna paramita. We were just studying that in the 7th ground, like the 6th ground within the 7th ground, and when the Bodhisattva sees emptiness, that they give rise to great compassion. So when we remove that self, then that pearl, we use that Indra's net, can just naturally reflect everything else in the cosmos. And then the natural function of our awakened nature, the Buddha nature, is to be compassionate. There's no thought, I have to be compassionate. It's just naturally compassionate. That's the awakened state. And that's how the Buddha is able to help all living beings exactly how they need to at all times without actually going anywhere. He's able to sit on his lotus throne and illuminate and help all beings at the same time. Because he doesn't need to... the analogy often is given is just like the moon and the water. right? There's the moon in the sky, and there's a reflection of the moon in all the lakes, all the waters of the world. The moon doesn't have to move, it's there, but its reflections is everywhere. So that's like the Buddha. The Buddha's reflections in his bodies go everywhere, reflecting our own mind, what our minds are like, to teach us exactly what we need to wake up. But he's constantly still, you could say, sitting on his lotus throne. Very peaceful, very happy. But he appears everywhere to help and save all of us. So on a very practical level for ourselves, in that kind of heart, if we can really not be with a self and empty out ourselves, then this natural ability to care and support and illuminate one another will function naturally. It's not something we have to force. It just happens naturally. Which I think is a really great concept, because it's, for instance, let's give the analogy of giving. Right? When we give, the Buddha says to really perfect giving, you empty out the giver, so there's no one receiving the gift. You empty out you empty out the receiver, no one's receiving the gift. You empty out the giver, no one's giving the gift. And you empty out the gift itself. There's no gift given. What does that mean? Sounds very complicated. Right? What it means is that you don't have any attachment to any of those things. You just give freely, naturally, according to exactly what's needed. There's no self there. There's no mark there that you attach to. And so that's why I say that. So the Buddha's state is, he just shines. There's no self. There's no mark. There's no other person. There's no living beings. There's no thing there that gets in the way of his light just shining out and illuminating everything. So that's the realm of the Buddhas. So can we be like that way all the time? We could try. Well, we can learn about maybe the other Dharma realms in the following weeks if we would like. There's 9 other ones, which we might find ourselves more engaged in other times. Just to maybe answer, because we did have a question about the 10 good deeds. The Master says, particularly 10 good deeds lead to the realm of the humans and the realms of the gods. If we live by the 10 good deeds, we go to the realm of the humans, and we live through the realm of the gods. But if we do the 10 evil deeds, then we end up in the 3 lower destinies, the hungry ghosts, hells, and animal realms. So, and even the Ashura realms, you could say. Yeah. So you could actually, if you do 10 good deeds, you can also end up in the Ashura realms. The Ashura realms is a fluid realm. If we want to talk about it, it extends through all the 6 realms in samsara, because some gods really like to fight, some humans really like to fight, some animals really like to fight, some ghosts really like to fight, and the hells, some hell beings really like to fight. So it goes throughout. Okay. So it's 9 o'clock. I guess we can ask questions, and then we can wrap up if there's anything people have. Okay.
Like when you were describing the internet and girls, I had a hard time imagining what it looked like in my head, how it illuminated each other.
It's a hard time imagining it.
Have you seen a disco ball? If you shine a light at the disco ball, the whole room gets filled with reflections. But a disco ball is limited by the small mirrors, right? Just imagine if you shine a light on the disco ball, but instead of shining spots of light, the whole room gets filled. Instead of spots of light, the whole room gets filled, just like sunlight.
So there's that one pearl that shines on all the other pearls.
And then that pearl shines on another pearl. Not only it shines on another pearl and is giving out its own light, but every other pearl is giving out its own light.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you have a myriad of disco balls that are not just reflecting light but giving out light, and each ball is reflecting each other ball, and the whole place just fills up. There's nowhere you can find a shadow.
Mm.
Right? So light is used to symbolize wisdom, just like just now when the power went out and you tried walking around the monastery. If you couldn't see where you were going, if you didn't have a flashlight, you would probably stub your toe on a chair leg or something and hurt yourself. So that's what happens to us when we go through life without light or without wisdom, we can't see where we are going. So having that light interpenetrate, and also it means that the Tagatas all have the same amount of light, as in they all share the same wisdom. And also light is used if your flashlight still.
Oh, yeah. This light's still gone. I was trying to flash light.
When I was young, one of the happiest things I would have is a flashlight with fresh batteries. That's like a flashlight.
Flashlight.
Flashlight with fresh batteries. I would go out at night and I would shine and imagine that it was a lightsaber. And if I had a friend or my brother, we would like play fight with each other. But in the movies, lightsabers clash, right? They're made of light or lasers, but they clash. But as we were play acting, the lights just pass one another, right? And I still do it sometimes.
Now I know what he's doing.
So light can shine on one another and it doesn't fight. It doesn't clash. It just passes through. And also, if you share light, if I have a candle and I light Tin Chuan's candle and I light a third candle, fourth, or he likes other candles, it doesn't take, no matter how many candles I light, it doesn't diminish the amount of light on my candle. So that's why light is used as an analogy or a metaphor when it comes to wisdom, and it has so many wonderful qualities to describe wisdom. So this light bouncing off one another, pearls are used because they are very lustrous, they reflect light. So you have a lot of pearls you see. My mom used to have this, I'm not sure if it was real pearl necklace, but if you look at it, you can see all the same reflections in every pearl.
Can you imagine it now?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought another way, I never thought that's a good way to explain it, disco balls. I never thought of disco balls. But just, if you imagine this room covered with mirrors, if you just imagine this whole room, every side of this room was mirrors. The mirror, up ceilings, all mirrors. If you looked at any place in the monastery at that point, in this room, you would see infinity going on and on and on. You see yourself there. You see everybody else in the room as well, in every place you look, right? So it's just a metaphor, right? We don't want to take it literally in the sense that I guess you could use that contemplation through your day, but that's a metaphor for the kind of expansiveness of our reality and our potential, and how we're all, you could say, part of one another in a very deep, profound way. So that to me is actually one of the most meaningful things about Buddhist cosmology, is that in the West, or in science, oftentimes we can feel a little bit insignificant or meaningless with this cosmos being so vast, and we're just being this little speck of dot that seems like has no part in this whole universe. It could just go on without us. That in fact, in Buddhism, it's not to put ourselves at the center and make ourselves really important, but it says we have an intricate place in this whole web of the universe, and that whatever we do affects everything else the moment we do it, because our light shines everywhere else at the same time, and everything else is shining on us at the same time as well. So what thought we have in our mind is really valuable and very important. We just can't let it go casually, because if it can be an awakened thought that helps everybody else around me, helps your brother, helps your parents, helps the monks here, helps the people online. And similar to people online, if they had a thought of goodness and wholesomeness, it affects us. We just don't see it because we don't have the vision. But that's how the Buddha's vision sees it. We're all interconnected.
Any final questions?
Anything online for the nice people who were real patient?
Reverend Sher says to announce that next 2 weeks he...
Oh, Reverend Sher will be away? Oh, okay, so we have a couple announcements. So next 2 weeks, Reverend Heng Sher will be away for, I think he's going to a conference and giving us some Dharma talks. So we'll be away for the next 2 weeks, and so the monks here in BBM will cover the upcoming week lectures. And then, actually next week we also have a Guanyin session or Guanyin recitation day for 1 day, starting at 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So people are welcome to join if you like. There's also an Amitabha recitation tomorrow, right? Sunday, tomorrow we'll have Amitabha recitation. Now that the power is back, I was thinking, oh, we had no power, maybe we didn't have Amitabha recitation. But we're going to definitely have Amitabha recitation tomorrow to literally the shine light, right? Amitabha's name means limitless light. Let's see.
Jinpo
Yeah.
is lecturing next week.
Yeah, I think Gene Fosher probably will lecture next week. Did I leave anything else out?
Next week is spring break. Do we have classes in?
DRBU, did Marty say if he's having classes next week?
He didn't cancel it.
He didn't cancel. So I think there's probably still classes as usual for the BBM, but the normal classes at CDDB are on spring break. So the monks will be here at BBM this week. We won't be going for classes at CDDB. Okay. Well, hope everybody had a good time. That's it. If anything was useful, please put it into practice. If anything wasn't, you can not follow it and let it go.
Go read the 10 Dharma Realms.
Go read the 10 Dharma Realms. Yeah, the 10 Dharma Realms is a very interesting text. And so, okay. So we do next is transference of merit, and then we can bow to the Buddhas. Okay? So do people need the sheet? Anybody need the sheet? I think everybody knows it. Okay. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Stand and bow to the Buddhas. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. Namo Tadam Quam Pho Huayan Ji Huayan Hai Hui Ho Hu Sai.
Quick webcast.